those who are listening to this would have no idea that I'm in the doghouse for having connected late today, and that we're recording this at a different time than normal. But I do have a perfectly good excuse. I have a note from my teacher that says that I am excused. And Kirk, you may wonder what I'm talking about, but I have spent the last 3 or 4 days absolutely mesmerized by the most oft-quoted phrase, sentence, verse, if you will, in the entire Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. Particularly as we approach this time of year. It's, unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given is the beginning of it. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, sir, very much.
Yeah, Yeshaya, Isaiah 9:6, and it goes into to 7. And it speaks about him being the Prince of Peace, and that the government will be on his shoulders, and that he is Almighty God, and that he is the everlasting Father. Well, by the way, Yeshua wasn't Almighty God.
No, he wasn't the Father, right?
He wasn't the Father either. Oh, and then Wonderful Counselor. That's another one of them. He wasn't that either. But you know what's interesting? It's not what the words say. The word that has been convoluted to government is a word that is a compound of two really interesting words. One is me, which is actually written M-Y in Hebrew. It's the additive to kara that makes it mikra. But in here it's the additive to Sarah. And it can either be an interrogatory, suggesting that you ponder the who, what, why, and when or how of something, or it is the identifies a specific individual that you should consider who has done something repetitively over a period of time. And Sarah means to engage, to endure, to be liberated by, to be empowered by. And then it's in the heart of Yisrael, which would be individuals who engage and endure, who are liberated and empowered by El, God. And the word only appears twice. As a matter of fact, it actually appears 3 times in Isaiah 9, 6, and 7, because of the fact that it's Misra twice, and just Sar, a contraction of it, the 3rd time. That's the only 3 times the word or its derivative appear in the entire Torah, Prophets, and Psalms. And rather than look up the root of the word, rather than look up the word that it is obviously based upon, the lords of religion were just insistent that government be everlasting and enduring. So they made it government. And oh, by the way, this Almighty God, well, El is certainly God. You know what the word is that follows El, God, which means that in English we'd have to put it before, because in most languages it's wagon red, and English it's red wagon. It's like the Ruach Kodesh. We don't say spirit set apart. We said set apart spirit. Well, the word that follows, which means it's the adjective, is Gibor. Now, I don't know how if you're doing this enough, because we have come across Gibor many times. One of the times we came across Gibor is it helped define who the Nephilim were. Gibor is a word that describes men, not God.
Yeah, who are powerful.
Yeah, powerful, mighty, valiant, engaged in government or engaged in battle. Toad was those things, wasn't he? He certainly was a courageous fighter on behalf of the people of Israel. He began. He came out of the ether with a sling and a stone, and fell Goliath.
Yeah, and it cost him to build the temple too.
Right, because he spent most of his life as a warrior, and you can't be any more important from God's perspective in government than was Dowd. The only one of two kings,
only authorized king,
yeah,
really.
to rule over a unified Yisrael and Yahowah, but the one who established the home on the ridgeline of Moriah.
Is it fair to assume, I have kind of thought this through, is Solomon, he was significant mostly because Dowd couldn't fulfill the other part.
Yeah, I think Solomon's only
not that big a deal. So he's the only two. They're the only two guys who.
I think Solomon's only Solomon only has I think two merits. One is when Yahweh asked him what he wants.
Yeah.
And he didn't say what most kings want. He didn't say, I want power. He didn't say, I want a long life. He didn't say, I want wealth. He didn't say, I want all the prettiest babes in town. He didn't do what the normal king does. He said, I want to be able to think clearly. That's what I want. I want to be able to exercise good judgment.
Me too.
Yeah, me too. And Yahweh said, hey, that's a really good answer. And because you gave that answer, you're going to get that and everything else. Which is, by the way, what he says to us. If we think clearly, if we exercise good judgment, then we not only get to know him and choose to participate in the covenant, then we get everything else. Unmitigated wealth and, you name it. And the prettiest babes are all covenant. So we even get that too. Just kidding there a little. Kidding just there a little bit. So that's part of what he did. And the other part of what he did is he took everything that Dowd had put aside, including the location, the threshing floor, on the ridgeline of Moriah, just up from his home. And he actually constructed, according to Yahweh's instructions, the home, the covenant home for Yahweh and for all of us. And so those are the two things that he did. But Solomon got preoccupied with his brilliance and with his wealth. And so what happens is Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, I do not think is inspired. I think what Ecclesiastes does is reveal what happens if your focus is on material things. And that's what Solomon's became. Vanity of vanities, failure, ego. Everything is ego and failure. Vanity of vanities. So maybe there's three reasons for Solomon. He teaches us the consequence of ego, and of a focus on worldly things. Yeah. And he, of course, the other two that we mentioned. So I think those are the reasons he exists. But anyway, and I've got some work to do on this. I'm just now within probably 4 or 5 hours of having completed my rewrite and re-edit of 9.6 and 9.7, because I went into it thinking, okay, this is the most prophetic one of the. It's the foundation, if you will, of Christianity. They view the child being virgin born, daddy being God himself, and that this child was born as God, and he is the Son of God, given to mankind by miraculous manner, and that he is Almighty God, and that he and the Father are one and the same. Mm-hmm. And so that, the government is going to be on his shoulders. He's everything that matters. And, of course, there's some problems with that. The first problem is that Yalad means that this child that was born, he's just an ordinary boy born in the ordinary way. Mm-hmm. from a mother and father coming together, impregnating the mom and being born of a pregnant mom. Ordinary birth. An ordinary boy. Oops.
Yeah.
And then the son is Nathan is the word, placed before us, bestowed.
A gift, uh-huh.
Yeah, offered to us. Well, the son, who was an ordinary young boy and is Dode.
Yeah.
And everything that this says thereafter speaks of Dode. Like, for example, Gibor, that's Dode's relationship with Yahowah. You know, he was a mighty fighter, a mighty warrior on behalf of God. He was the head of the government established by God.
Yeah, we remember he was the final blow that wiped out the Amalekites.
Yeah.
400-year reign of the Amalekites ended with Dode.
Yeah, and but Yahowah was not. Yahowah never fought a battle.
No.
Yahowah was never head of a government.
No.
And it goes all the way through that it's clear that it's speaking of Dode, and because it absolutely, I mean, I know that I'm still open to rebuttal, and I've sent out the chapter once. I'll send it out again probably this evening, and you know, anybody in the covenant that wants to take me to task and take a different point of view and say that I'm wrong, I'm certainly going to listen. And I'll change my conclusion if given reason to do so. But at this point, I'm convinced that this not only speaks of Dode, it does not speak about Yahowah. And that very little of it can be applied to him. And matter of fact, when you really look at the tenses of the verbs and the meanings of each of the words that it uses, it, right from the beginning, excludes him. Yeah, it's actually not a son, not a child is born, it's a child was born. And so, all the way through, it's it is the process, and this is why I would say it's one of the most inflammatory things I've ever concluded.
Well, let me interject something here.
Yeah, let me just finish the thought. Then I do one. It's the most inflammatory thing I've ever written. If it continues to play out this way, because it reveals that there's someone far more important for us to listen to and to focus on than Yahowah. Even if Christians understood who he was and what he stood for, there is somebody vastly more important for us to know, the beloved of Yahowah, Dode. And that is because Dode explained how to observe the Torah and how to best engage in the covenant. No one did that better. And so that's what this means. And if that's what this means, and that the kingdom of the seat of honor and the kingdom of Dode is what's going to be established not just for a short period of time on earth upon Yahowah's return, which would have been enough by itself to say, we're back into the authority of the Torah, because that was the only authority that Dode had. But it's forever. Yeah. It is forever. So it is extraordinarily profound. It is a statement in and of itself that completely destroys Christianity and replaces it with Dode's interpretations of the Torah.
Well, a couple of things came to mind as you were talking to me. One of them is obviously Dode's the only one that we have writings in a precise language of Hebrew.
Correct.
Tell us what he said. We have nothing from Yahowah.
And we have 100 Mizmor Psalms, 25 Proverbs, and he is quoted vociferously in Samuel, and First and Second Samuel, Kings. First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, and throughout the prophets. All in the original language, all meticulously maintained. versus we have nothing from Yosha in the original language, and all of what we do have, even in Greek, is extraordinarily carelessly maintained.
Yeah. Well, the second thing, in all of my studies of church proof text, what they try to prove that their New Testament is correct, is totally reliable on, the New Testament is entirely reliable on the Septuagint, which is Greek,
right,
and not maintained.
Right.
Because it's been two of them, actually.
Totally and completely unreliable. And a very bad translation that was never reliable. Even from the onset, it wasn't reliable, and very quickly. The Greeks, like the case with the Romans with Latin, there wasn't a Greek individual or a Roman individual with any integrity. I mean, it just wasn't.
No.
The more learned they were, the more corrupt they were. Right. They were right. They were so infatuated with themselves that they thought nothing of changing everything to write themselves into it. And that's just the way they were. You can't trust what the Greeks wrote. You can't trust what the Romans wrote. Latin and Greek scribes were the antithesis of trustworthy.
Well, I mean, this whole chapter 9 is
which is what we're going to read.
Any Christian who's looking and read this would have to say, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" And then the stuff that I also read recently, just went back and reread, and things that I've actually seen in person rather. And a lot of this material is based on the Vaticanus and the Sinaiticus and Alexandrius, as if somehow this 5th, 6th, and 7th century canons have some merit.
Yeah, and right. And the oldest of those with a significant portion of the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms dates to 500 CE.
Yeah.
As opposed, so that's the oldest version of a somewhat intact, somewhat complete, well, not completely complete, but at least bordering on significant amount of information of the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms in the Septuagint dates to 500 CE versus the Dead Sea Scrolls, which dates to 200 BCE. I mean, you're talking about 700 years difference, and in the original language. I mean, and particularly at a time where Hebrew was not known to scholars. They just didn't know it. Hebrew was essentially destroyed as a living language by Hadrian. If you spoke Hebrew, you were going to be killed. You'd be tortured and killed. If you read Hebrew, you were going to die a miserable death. So that's a reason why it all became such rubbish. They weren't, the Septuagint, the various copies of it just copied from one another, and so as a Greek translating Greek into his own proclivities, as opposed to going to the original Hebrew and translating it.
Yeah.
So, what we'll do for this coming Friday Shabbat and thereafter is continue to delve into, as we did it in somewhat cursory fashion this past week, because what happened on last Friday is I had written this as I went into it expecting it to be about Yosha. Well, it's been drilled in my head for all of my life.
Or your life.
Yeah. That's what I expected it to be. So I thought Yahowah was announcing Yosha. That's what I had written every time I'd gone through it previously. And then, something has happened to me over the past few years. I have developed a bromance with a fella. And that fella is Dode. I love this guy. I just absolutely adore Dode. I mean, other than my two sons, the only other man that I've come to adore. And I just think Dode is the greatest teacher and the most brilliant mind of all time. So now I'm coming into it with a different mindset. And so I thought maybe both are being spoken of here. And as I went through it, that's how I started to translate it. And then it dawned on me, just as we were doing the show a week ago.
Yeah.
That really isn't the case at all. Not about both of them. It's about Dode. He's not only the only one mentioned by name, it's all about him. And so I went back through, and for the last week, I've been trying to lay out that case. And it's, I'm doing it as thoroughly as I know how. I might. Let's see, the chapter is now 87 pages. Now, it does cover all of Yahowah 9. And because Yahowah 9 begins with a reference to the day of Midian, it does cover 2 chapters of Shaphat's judges as they present the day of Midian. So there's a lot more to the chapter than just those 2 verses.
Yeah.
But
that's pretty...
But those verses are the clue, my friends.
Stops you in your tracks.
Yeah, if those 2 verses say what I think they say, and I think I lay a pretty solid case for that,
Yeah.
then the world is absolutely, terribly wrong. Now, there's a lot of reasons to reject Christianity, but this will be among the most important. If Yahowah 9, 6, and 7 are speaking of Dode, which they are, and not Yahowah, it's just over for Christianity.
And there goes the Hallelujah Choir.
There you go.
Well,
there.
It would actually also...
As Terry yesterday.
Go ahead, Scott.
I went that.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Well, it would also make sense. He's never really made it about him. It's never... He's been... obviously, you want to get to... He wants you to know him, but it's never... He's never been... It's never been the whole thing is to know him. It's to become the relationship with him.
He doesn't even say he wants you to know him. He didn't even make that. He didn't go that far. He says, "I want you to know the one who sent me."
Yeah, Father, look to the Father.
Well,
don't look to me. Don't pray to me. Don't look to me.
Well, yeah, I'm talking.
Talk to the Father.
It would make sense from Yah's point of view that it wouldn't be the person that when he diminishes himself. That wouldn't be the most important person, because that doesn't. I guess in my mind that doesn't fit with him, because it's never been solely about him. It's about you get to know him, come to him, know him, but it's never been like that's your only thing that you get from that.
Let me ask you a question, Scott. Do you think that Yahowah is reasonably capable?
Yeah.
Do you think he could accomplish if something was important to him? Do you think he could accomplish it?
Yeah.
Okay. So your assumption here is that Yahowah, who just happens to be the creator of the universe, is reasonably competent, and if something's important to him, he could accomplish it.
He could have did it himself, but that's
okay.
not what he did in the beginning.
Oh no, he doesn't like working independently. He likes working through people. That's obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the Yahowah, if Yahowah wanted us to know what he said and did, do you think we would have a copy of what he said and did in the language he said it?
Yeah, if he wanted that, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if it was important for us to know what Yahowah said and did, that he would have preserved not only a copy in the original language, but something that hadn't been so copy-edited, so altered, that there are more changes than there are words?
No, you wouldn't allow it.
He would have provided something, at least something that we could turn to that says this dates to a time before religious corruption, and this is in the original language. Do we have anything? I mean, a single document, even a portion of a document from any of the eyewitnesses in the original language, or that hasn't been substantially altered and manipulated by Romans and Greeks?
No, I don't believe so. No,
we have nothing. The answer is absolutely, but not even a tidbit. Now, with Dode,
before you go on here,
yeah,
I've always said that the most impressive thing about Yahowah is that was Yahowah is that was the one time that knowing Yahowah wasn't beneficial to the person that knew him. So he said that would be the one thing that they had to do, that it wouldn't be beneficial to know him because he couldn't save them. So what did he do? He didn't find somebody else to do it. He diminished himself, and he said,
right.
I'll do this.
I'll do this. Right. So knowing Yosha is irrelevant because it's not Yosha that saved us. It's Yahowah.
Yeah.
It's Yahowah. Now let's go over the other way. With Dode, we have 100 Psalms, we have 25 Proverbs, and he's the central character in Samuel, in Chronicles, and in Kings. And he is the most spoken about individual throughout the prophets. And not only do we have this enormous volume of information, including the lyrics to his 100 Psalms, we have the Dead Sea Scrolls that preserve them for us. And beyond all of that, the Masoretic text, for all the problems of the rabbis, the Masoretic text is better than 85 to 90% accurate. And when you add that to the treasure trove of scrolls found in the caves above Qumran, we can restore it to 100% accuracy. Now, which do you think Yahowah wanted us to have?
Well, probably those, yeah. Probably
Dode, right?
Yep.
All you need to learn about God, you can learn from Dode. Dode didn't write the Torah; he explained it. Dode didn't establish the covenant; he lived it. Dode was not good; he was right, and in the end, that's all that really matters. There's a reason that Yahowah loved Dode more than anybody else, and the reason is that Dode was his best student and became his protege. That's it.
Well, pretty strong case right there.
Yep. And it's made throughout Yeshaya 9, 6, and 7. I'd like to return, if we can, to the case against the Christian New Testament. We were covering chapter 9 of Observations. Look up and pay attention. And where we were is that this realization based upon Jerome's letter to the Pope, his acknowledgments, that the Christian New Testament, Greek copyists, now this is something that Jerome didn't mention, but it's absolutely and unequivocally true. They worked in the same places, for the same political and religious institutions at the same time as those who had butchered the Latin translations to the point that Jerome said they were laughable. They weren't even the least bit credible, and there was no two that were even remotely alike. The same can be said of the Greek codexes. And it's not just said, that's my opinion. No, we have thousands of Greek codexes. And unlike the Latin, where the church did what the Muslims did, the Muslims to say that this is the Quran perfect, just the way it was up there, written by the pen, held by the big fish and floating in the sky, and therefore perfect, exactly what Allah had said. And of course, they destroyed all the competing copies several hundred years after Muhammad actually recited it, and said the sole surviving copy must be perfect. Well, they attempted to do the same thing. The Roman Catholic Church did with the Latin copies of their New Testament. I said, well, which is they didn't care about the Old Testament. They didn't even bother to translate it initially. But in terms of the New Testament, oh yeah, they destroyed all the old ones. So this then had to be the perfect one. So the fact of the matter is that they didn't destroy the Greek translations. And so we have absolute proof that they are inconsistent with one another and wildly divergent from the basis of English translations. You cannot trust what you read in the Christian New Testament. That's not a statement of opinion. It is irrefutable fact. And for those that say, I can't believe God would allow men to corrupt His Word. Let me let you in on a real secret here, folks. The New Testament isn't His Word.
Bingo.
And number two, folks, God lets men do whatever they want to do.
And it's called free will.
Boy, isn't that the truth? It's called free will. He allows men to do whatever they want to do. He has given His testimony to some 40 prophets. They wrote it down. He proved that He inspired them through prophecy. You can read what He had to say. It is magnificently maintained. He didn't allow anyone to corrupt His testimony. But your New Testament isn't His testimony, and it is hopelessly corrupt. So as it relates to the Greek and the Latin scribes, they were equally incompetent. But, and this bears repeating, unlike the Latin, where the divergent manuscripts were destroyed to hide the evidence of this crime, we have absolute and irrefutable proof that the Greek translators and copyists created many forms and variations which were laden with mistakes and changes, and that their many errors and alterations and inaccuracies were the products of blundering and ignorant scribes. Now that might sound like I'm being pejorative here. I am simply quoting from Jerome in his letter to the Pope. Over the past 50 years, 69 extant Greek copies of the Christian New Testament have been recovered and published, all of them dating to the early 2nd through mid-4th century CE. And they are not only substantially different with respect to each other, there are over 300,000 known variances between these early manuscripts and the Textus Receptus. The same is evidenced when the oldest manuscript and extant papyri are compared to the Nestle Aland. The blended texts publishers claim underlie more modern English translations. So while there is no reason to doubt Jerome's claim that the Latin texts were irreconcilably corrupt, we know for absolute certain it is an irrefutable fact that the Greek manuscripts were already corrupt beyond credibility. Totally and completely incompatible. Since the evidence in this regard is prolific and irrefutable, this realization completely obliterates Christianity's credibility for anyone who is aware of the evidence. Therefore, if you are a Christian, you are either ignorant of the evidence or you're irrational. Even if scribes of the 3rd and 4th centuries had accurately maintained the text they were given, which they did not, in fact, they were worse than those that came before them, it would not have mattered. A perfect copy of an imperfect document remains invalid. It is like correctly copying an incorrect answer during a test.
Why is that so hard to get through your head, to so many people's head?
You know, it's...
I mean, if I repeat a lie and twist it and say a lie, and repeat a lie and say a lie, it's still a lie.
Because the realization that the evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable, that the Christian New Text is wholly and completely corrupted and invalid,
it's too devastating,
and unreliable, is so devastating to Christianity. I mean, Christianity ceases to function. Faith isn't even applicable when you know that the entire basis of your religion is unreliable. So you can't even bridge that gap with faith. So what do the faithful do?
Ignore the information.
Right. That's why you can't get it through their heads.
Wow.
I mean, what we're talking about here, folks, is irrefutable. The information is ubiquitous. So to be a Christian and to place one's faith on your New Testament of your Bible is to be wholly ignorant and or wholly irrational. It's just flat out stupid. And that means that if you want to know God, if you have any interest in knowing who he is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return, you have only one place to turn.
One source, Torah.
Yeah, the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms. And oh, by the way, they're all one and the same.
Yeah.
The teaching, the Torah teaching permeates all, and the prophetic statements permeate all, and all are writings. It's all one collective entity. That's it. No other place to turn. And by the way, there you will meet a God worth knowing. A God that doesn't want to be worshipped. A God that's trying to lift you up and doesn't want you to bow down. A God that's not interested in you yabbering in prayer to him all day long. That instead wants you to listen to him because what he has to say is important. A God that's offering the greatest deal ever provided by anyone to anyone, the covenant. He's empowering, he's liberating, he's funny, he's brilliant, he's consistent, he's dependable. That's who you'll find there. That's what you will find there. You find that Torah means teaching, not law. That the covenant is a family-oriented relationship. There's only one of them, and it is eternal. And that God has but one name. And it isn't Allah. It isn't Jesus. And for God-forsaken reasons, it isn't Lord. It's Yahowah.
No, it isn't Lord.
And so that's what you'll find. And that's where you need to go if you have any interest in knowing him. Now, for the Christians, what about my salvation? What about the salvation of those that dearly departed? If your fixation is on your salvation, you aren't worth knowing. You aren't worth knowing. You're just way too self-centered to be worth knowing. Don't want you to look. Don't want you to find the answer. Don't want you to be saved. If that is your fixation, don't care. The covenant isn't about saving you. It's about making you immortal, perfecting you, adopting you into God's family, empowering you and enriching you, enlightening you. The byproduct of all of those things is to be saved, if you will. But it's just a byproduct. If that is your goal, don't bother. It's like saying, I want to marry somebody because they're really rich, and I want to inherit all that they're going to inherit. Don't bother. Unless you want to get to know who God is, what he's like, what he doesn't like, what he's offering. Unless you want to get to know him first and decide whether or not you like him and you want to spend eternity with him, and then consider what it is that he's offering and decide whether or not you like that, because there ain't going to be any praying, there aren't going to be any hymns, there's not going to be any worship, there aren't going to be any religious people, there's not going to be any politics, there's not going to be any militaries, there's not going to be any patriotism. If patriotism and politics and religion are of interest to you, you'd hate heaven. Those things are not only excluded from heaven, they're despised in heaven. If you love Christmas, if you love Easter, if you love Halloween, go away. Because those things are despised by God. So, if your goal is to be saved, you ought to be smart enough to first figure out who it is that you'd be spending eternity with. Do you like them? Where is it? What's going to happen there? What is going to be excluded there? If you want to spend eternity with the soul of mommy and daddy, the dearly departed. If they were Christians, you aren't going to find them in heaven. It isn't going to happen. They're not there. So stop pretending like that's where you want to go.
That's a good point.
Christianity's credibility for anyone who is aware of the evidence is destroyed. That is just the bottom line. And since we are dealing with facts, not faith, let's accept the reality that half of the Christian New Testament was corrupt the moment the author's pen stained the papyrus. Paul's 13 letters are ungodly, they're invalid, and worse, they are demonic. Let me say that again. They are demonic.
According to Paul.
And by Paul's own admission. Paul never spoke of being inspired by Yahowah, but he absolutely admitted that his was influenced and controlled by Satan. Read the end to his second letter to the Corinthians if you don't believe me. Anyway, that's a story for another book. That's Questioning Paul. As for the few Greek texts that have merit, Matanya, Yahowah, and Revelation, they're now suspect because their value has been eroded by misguided translators and copyists. I mean, there's a lot in Yahowah that is just flat out wrong. There's even material in Matanya, my favorite, that is wrong. A glaring example of this would be the story of the adulterous woman told in Yahowah, John 8, 1 through 11. The entire episode, including "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone," was contrived in the 8th century CE. There's no record of it of any kind in any of the hundreds, if not thousands, of manuscripts composed between the 1st and 8th centuries. Not one. The entire account was made up because Christians wanted their God to contradict the Torah. Matanya, one of my favorites, where he says that in accord with the prophecy that a virgin shall be with child, that he was born of a virgin. Not true. Not true. Prophecy does not say that a virgin will be with child. There was no virgin birth.
But you have to, or you can't be a Canaanite.
But yeah, that's true. You can't be a Canaanite.
Come on, man.
Right. Every pagan religion, the son of the Son, the Son of God, was virgin born.
Yeah.
And every one of those pagan religions, God died. Their God died and was resurrected. So for the new God of Christianity to be able to be every bit as good, if not better, than the pagan gods, well, then he would have to be virgin born too. And he would have to die and be resurrected too. And so those are pagan concepts. Mm-hmm.
Well, doesn't that prove that the story of Lazarus is made up?
I don't know.
This would be a wrong teaching to resurrect someone. I understand it could be because he was a friend and he did it just to prove it or something, but that's such a bad... They use that where this is the precursor to what will happen to us.
Yeah.
That's the way it's talking.
But if you even listen to what Yosha said, why are you bothering me with this?
Yeah.
Listen, this really has nothing to do with me. I mean, I understand for 3 days, he's been laying there and you miss him and you're all grieving about it and big whoop-de-doo. You want him back. God, just to silence the noise. I'll do this for you. I mean, that's the attitude. When you read the surrounding text, that's the attitude. And by the way, and what do we hear from him? What do we learn from him that Lazarus that has merit? Nothing. Not a thing. He's not even mentioned. He's not even mentioned again, is he?
No.
And by the way, does Yosha equate it to himself?
Never.
No.
But the Christians do. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think.
I've wondered that what would actually happen. And one thing is just like the case with the adulterous woman, writing in the dirt, and right, that it was added. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that
even if
medicine, in terms of the ability to determine whether or not somebody was simply in a coma, whether or not they were knocked out and comatose, if you will, that later they were revived. Yeah, is there that possibility? Absolutely. Absolutely. To be dead means that your consciousness, your soul, has departed. Mm-hmm. That would be the sign of departure. Now, to bring a soul back and to reanimate a body, what's the point? And particularly with Yahowah, be going backwards. You got this body that was all beat up. Why would you want to resurrect it?
Yeah, you couldn't do it. It is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, and if it was a physical body, how did he magically appear on the road to Emmaus? Why did he tell the women, including his mom, why didn't they reckon? Why did he say, "Don't touch me"? How was he able to walk through the wall? So now it's taking things out of context and relying on the wrong text and not thinking about it is all part of it. But based upon what we're covering right now, the clearest answer is, who's Lazarus?
We'll put.
What are you quoting?
So what?
Yeah. So what? What are you quoting from?
Well, I brought it up.
I know. You're quoting from it.
Proofs in these things on the reliability of the New Testament.
You're quoting from. You're quoting from a.
What about this? And I'm going. Well, what about it?
Yeah. So as I just mentioned, similarly, Madanya incorrectly cites Yahowah, Isaiah 7:14, claiming that the virgin shall be with child, to infer that Yahowah was virgin born. That's suspect. This is a topic that in the 15th chapter of Observations for Our Time, which is for a future date, we will get into, but the word that was used in Yahowah 7:14 is not the word for virgin. It just means a woman of marriageable age will become impregnated and will be with child. That's all it means. There is a Hebrew word for virgin, and that was not the word that was used. Simply stated, the Greek, Latin, and English texts of the Christian New Testament cannot be trusted. Manuscripts have been in a constant state of degradation since the Greek texts were first composed. This problem cannot be resolved or rationally refuted. Moreover, subsequent translations can be no more accurate than the underlying text, which, as we know, is a jumbled mess of alterations and errant translations. Should you seek proof of this, go buy a copy of, it'll cost you, $20? Philip Comfort's text of the earliest New Testament Greek manuscripts. Just go buy it. Philip Comfort is the compiler. His book is called Text of the Earliest New Testament Greek Manuscripts, where all 69 pre-Constantine manuscripts are presented for your consideration. Don't blame me for a lack of faith until you have observed the evidence. In the introduction of his book, Comfort wrote, "This book provides transcriptions of 69 of the earliest New Testament manuscripts. All of the manuscripts are dated from between the early 2nd century to the beginning of the 4th. He wrote AD 100 through 300. We chose AD, which is, by the way, Anno Domini, year of our Lord, and it was his Lord because the Lord is Satan. We chose the year of our Lord, 300, as the terminus daquim, because New Testament manuscript production changed radically after the persecution under Diocletian, AD 303 to 305, and especially after Constantine declared Christianity to be a legal religion in the empire." end quote. You're familiar with the concept changed radically?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that the copyists copied them as they were, or their copies changed significantly? In fact, radically would be far more than significantly.
Yeah.
But the copies changed tremendously from what they previously were.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So if we have the 69 pre-Constantine manuscripts, and they are not consistent with one another, and then after that, the copyists changed them radically, what do you have?
You have nothing.
Yeah, you got a swamp.
Yeah.
Changed radically when applied to manuscript production means that the manuscript copied after 325 CE were so different from their predecessors they were no longer comparable. That's what it means. It would not take long for alterations to blossom from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. Let's consider a visual example. If you were to dive into a swamp and grab a bucket full of alligator excrement, and then dissect what you found, studying the evidence by amplifying the specimens individually and collectively under a microscope, sharing every nuance that could be derived from a close and careful evaluation of this collection. The fact remains that all you'd be contemplating would be a chaotic arrangement of reptilian discharge that has been rotting away in a swamp. Nothing. Listen, if it's okay for Elia, it's okay. It's okay for me. That's an inside swipe. Elia was talking about the Lord and the prophets of the Lord, and they couldn't stir their Lord to perform his easiest miracle, which was to light a fire. He was a lightning god. The Lord is a lightning god, after all. And so he says, "What's wrong? Is your God out taking a dump?" Yes, it's nothing but a chaotic arrangement of reptilian discharge that has been rotting away in a swamp.
You
nothing.
Turn a phrase, don't you?
Yeah, nothing. You got to have a reason that God's going to choose to engage with you. He picked people for reasons like Elia. He picked because Elia was sarcastic and had a sense of humor. That's why he picked him. I'm telling you those are the facts. I may not have much to bring to the party, but I do have a quick wit and a biting tongue.
Yes, you do.
And these are the facts, folks. If that's my only qualification, I'll take it and run with it. I'm not trying to compete with Dode. I'm not going to become the most beloved or most brilliant, but I'm happy to be used. And this, what I've just conveyed to you, is the truth.
Well, you got to play to your strengths too.
You got to play to your strengths, right?
Very good.
And there's nothing wrong with echoing God's strengths. He has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
When I wrote this,
they called him BS faces.
Oh yeah, he says those that pray to me that are Taurus. It looks like they've got bull excrement all over their faces. Yeah, so I have no problem comparing the words of the Christian New Testament to alligator or reptilian discharge rotting away in a swamp. It's a very apt visualization of what's there. Nothing's going to ever change that, no matter how accurate or complete your rendition of the information conveyed and that excrement becomes. It matters not how one slices it, how one analyzes it, how one polishes it, or rearranges it. It is a product of decay. Let that sink in. The Christian New Testament is a product of decay. That's an irrefutable fact. Swamps not only tend to breed bacteria, they are home to some of the world's most venomous and deadly reptiles. They are not safe for human habitation. Such is the case with the manuscripts of the Greek text of the Christian New Testament. Any attempt to accurately translate what remains is akin to evaluating decomposing organic material plucked from a swamp. As crude as this may sound, even shocking, it accurately depicts the condition of the Christian Scriptures. And as we will discover in due time, Yahowah uses the same metaphor to depict this same errant testimony. Now this brings us to the realization that there was no Jesus Christ. And he did not create the actual individual whose name was Yahusha, did not create the Christian institution known as the church. Yahusha did not say, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." That's what you read, though, in the King James Version, Matthew 16 through 18. He did not speak Elizabethan English. But since he did not speak Greek either, what you read in the Greek was at the very best a translation of his Hebrew declaration, composed long after he conveyed it, by someone who did not know him and was not even alive at the time it was spoken. Specifically, the Greek word ecclesia is a compound of ek, which means out, and kaleo, to call. It means to call out. Kirk, are you familiar with a Hebrew word? What would the Hebrew word be that would be translated ecclesia, to call out?
Mikra.
Yeah.
I'll call
Mikra.
Simply.
Mikra. Yeah, mikra. Based on the verb kara.
Mm-hmm.
Means to call out. Mikra is a combination of me, which, me is that interrogatory that asks us to ponder the implications of something.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
the who, the what, the why, the how, and kara, to call out. Mm-hmm. Now, the Hebrew word kara is richer than the Greek word ecclesia. Ecclesia means to call out. Mikra does mean to call out, but it also means to summon, to invite, mm-hmm. to meet and to welcome, to read and to recite. It's a lot richer word. But that's what he would have said.
You can get there with it, but you can't get to church with it.
Well, you can absolutely. I mean, there is not a single person in the history of Greek scholarship that could dispute with any credibility that ecclesia is the closest Greek word and the most appropriate word to translate the word that was actually spoken, which is mikre. That can't be disputed.
No. And
so what he said is mikre. That was translated ecclesia in Greek, a language he did not speak. And then ecclesia, rather than being continued to be translated, was translated from Hebrew to Greek, and therefore should be translated into English. We don't have a transliteration of it, which would be ecclesia. We don't have a translation of it, which is to call out.
We have they call out assembly in English. I mean,
right. We have a replacement, mm-hmm. and the replacement has no bearing whatsoever to the Greek word or the Hebrew word. The replacement is church. It is based on Church. Church was the daughter of the sun god and the Germanic religions. Mm-hmm. Church is the basis for the German and English words for circle, circular reasoning, and for the circle disk of the sun, mm-hmm. halo, and wreaths, circus even.